To bribe or not to bribe? That is the question. Is it better to give a Jolly Rancher, or is it best to appreciate work with that intrinsic motivation? The No-Frills Teacher Podcast starts now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of the No-Frills Teacher Podcast. I am your host, Joe Camps, aka the No-Frills Teacher, and this is To Bribe or Not To Bribe. So I'd like to give a little of the background on why I decided to do this episode, and it started with scrolling through social media as I often do, and coming across a teacher that had posted how she helps support her teacher besties with strategies and management skills where teachers don't have to give any sort of external reward uh, for classroom management. And this is something that this one particular teacher, and I know many people feel this way, kind of is similar to that whole homework, no homework debate episode that I did a while back, where you usually have two sides where one is for and one's against, and often the case that's very similar with rewarding students and what that looks like. Many teachers believe in some sort of external motivation, and then there's another camp that only believes in that intrinsic motivation, that internal reward, that sense of pride, and not bribing students really with anything external, uh, with the expectation that students should just be able to perform the tasks that they're asked to perform, or if students are expected to complete assignments on time, or do well on assessments, that the good grade or the job well done is enough for that student. So this teacher is out there, and she's very adamant about not believing in any sort of reward system, and working with and collaborating with other teachers with providing ideas and things like that, where they could kind of get away from that. And it struck me as a bit odd and unusual in the fact that, not that this particular teacher didn't believe in external rewards, the fact that this teacher was willing to help other teachers kind of see the light, so to speak. And that's what got me kind of hung up on that whole thing that I was watching it online. And I felt that is an important episode to talk about and address this topic, because I know that many teachers are divided on this. However, I do believe that even if you feel a particular way with rewarding students, not rewarding students, it doesn't necessarily mean that one way is better than the other, one way is right. I think that all comes down to just teacher preference, and also the composition of your classroom, your students that you have. And that might change year to year. So I'm going to just come right out and say that I reward my students. I provide external rewards for my students. I always have, and I will continue to do so. Now, I have to adapt it usually year after year because I realize things that I have that work for one particular group don't necessarily work for the next group, but I do provide external rewards. Now, do I hope that there's some sort of internal motivation for a student to perform well or to complete an assignment and not hope to get some sort of incentive to do so? Yeah, absolutely. That's part of growing up. But I absolutely reward my students, and I love doing that because I get to see my students um, really enjoy the fruit of their labor, if you will. It's no different than adults that work for incentives, I feel, my own personal opinion. Um, so if I'm talking about taking away some sort of external motivation for my students to perform well on a task, or let's say, an assessment, like if my students are taking a statewide standardized assessment, and I say, okay, you get a high achievement level. Now, obviously, I want my students to be able to do well because they want to do well, and that is something that I do talk about daily with my students. However, if I have students striving to increase their achievement level and outperform a class average, a district average, a state average, that student, in my opinion, should be rewarded. If I have the mindset as a teacher that I should not reward my students with anything external, then I suppose if I'm on a staff that receives some sort of recognition money, some bonus money for student performance scores, I guess I should decline that as well, because is that not the same thing? Is not that carrot dangling in front of me for A plus money or some sort of bonus money or some sort of recognition, is that not the same for excelling at what I'm doing? Well, if I'm not doing that for my students, doesn't that make me a hypocrite? Should I decline any sort of public acknowledgement or any sort of financial incentive? Should I tell my principal, no, I'm okay. You know what? Why don't you send that back to the state? That money, I don't need, just knowing that I did a good job with my students is really all that matters. That's basically what I'd be telling my children, my students, if they strive to excel and then it's like, well, job well done. Sometimes the job well done doesn't cut it. Now, to be fair, I'll play devil's advocate and let's take a moment and think about why maybe the teachers don't believe in external rewards for students. And this is where really any listeners out there, if you guys want to chime in the comments, if you don't do rewards or reward system, I'd love to hear why, your reasoning, what you do in place of it. But I'm going to go ahead and just make an assumption, and it might be the wrong assumption, but I believe that perhaps one of the biggest factors why a teacher might not do any sort of reward system, it's because of money. And think about how you hear teachers all the time having to use their own personal money, their own personal funds to purchase treasure box items and any sort of rewards or incentives for students, whether it be pencils ranging up to pieces of candy or whatever it may be, poppets, whatever you might do, or if you have a treasure box, if you don't have a treasure box, if you have a class store, you don't have a class store. Oftentimes, it's teachers that are, footing the bill to buy these items. Maybe you'll be lucky and you'll get some money from your PTA or school or parent donations. That's not always the case. So I definitely can understand why teachers might be hesitant to continuously put out their use their own money to constantly restock some sort of reward system or some sort of treasure box. So I do believe that money is a big factor. Also, it's another thing that's on your plate that takes away time from other things. You have to plan out how you're going to do some sort of reward system. Are you going to be consistent with your reward system? Are you going to overlook things? What do you do with a student that just doesn't respond to any sort of external reward? I don't care if I get this, I have this at home. There are students out there that are indifferent. They don't really care for it, and then you kind of you lose that bargaining chip, I guess, if you will, with trying to motivate a student with some sort of external reward, and they could really care less what you have or what you're offering. They might not like what you're offering. Um, so I have encountered that in my own experience over the years of teaching, where I've had students that the external rewards just didn't work for them, or they just simply didn't care, and then I had to adapt. So perhaps it's student buy-in. Definitely feel like money's a big part of it. It's definitely time consuming. You got to keep up with it and be consistent, I feel, for it to be successful. If you're going to do it quarterly, don't skip any quarters. Are you going to do it weekly? What do you have? Are students providing input into what you have, or is it something that you already have? I mean, you could definitely reach out to um, various stakeholders, within the community, and reach out to PTA, PTO, and see if there's any sort of families that would like to donate items to a class reward system. Um, so, like I said, I can understand that there are going to definitely be some factors that come into play with why a teacher might not want to do some sort of reward system. Now, once again, it could also just be based off principle and just personal belief that if the world does not always reward you with something, so there's also the mindset that, well, I'm preparing my students for later in life as they get older and they grow up. That you're not always going to have something to work towards, something dangling in front of you to earn, and sometimes you just have to be able to just you know get it done. And that is true as they do get older, and that does happen obviously in adulthood. But then again, there are plenty of times that adults are offered rewards and incentives to perform well. If you're a teacher out there and you're looking to do some sort of reward system, here's some advice for you. I would say start off small and keep it simple. Have students buy into it by giving their ideas, take their suggestions of, within reason, of course, of what you could offer. Have students come up with a plan along with you of ways they could earn these incentives, whether it's through assessments. We just have to be careful because if you have students that don't perform well, they're going to be left out, and you don't want to create that system in your classroom. So what you need to do is come up with a plan where students have an opportunity. And I'm not talking about everyone getting a participation trophy. What I'm talking about is that students still earn these incentives, these rewards, these external rewards. And what does that look like for your classroom? And what does that look like for each individual student in your classroom? Because once again, if you go solely off of students perform well, like a 100 club or whatever it may be, you're going to have disappointed students, of course. So is it behavioral? Is it academic? Is it being a good citizen? Is it being a leader in your class or in your school? So there are different ways you could go about that. But having students give some ideas and brainstorm, come up with ways that they can earn these incentives is going to create greater buy-in. Personally, one of the things that I do for my students, we call it a brainy buck market, where we have class money, which many schools have class money. I like it. I give them actual, physical paper money that I print out. the kids in different denominations so that they learn how to, when it's time to use their brainy bucks, they also know how to exchange money, make change. They learn the importance of saving money because they could roll over their money and save it for the next quarter, and then they could buy larger items. So a student uses all their Brady bucks for the first quarter, and they earn some second quarter. They're never going to get top tier rewards or prizes or whatever you want to call it that we decide as a class to purchase. And a lot of it does come out of my own pocket. A lot of the things that I do get also come from families and from the PTA because I make a point to reach out to these families and ask for donations. And because the kids love it so much, the parents are happy with it, so they want to contribute to it. So if you get buy-in from the students, you're most likely also going to get buy-in from some families. And it's not that parents have to give you, hundreds of dollars. You'd be surprised how far $10 could go, $15 can go. Uh, just going over to the dollar section at Target or a Dollar Tree, or getting something from Oriental Trading. So, student buy-in, make it equitable, give students all an opportunity to earn something. Start small if you're looking to start small. And those are going to be the keys to success with that. Now, you obviously have to think about students that do not buy in at all. What alternative do you have for those students where they can still be rewarded with something? Oftentimes, I found out through my own experiences that the students that did not necessarily buy in just didn't like what I was offering. So once I had those students come up with a list of items or like a wish list of items they like to see in our quarterly Brainy Buck market, they were much more invested in trying to earn Brainy Bucks. So, and students have opportunities throughout the school day to earn, whether it's completion of assignments, whether it's playing games like Kahoot or doing Blue Kit, and students, top three students earn. First place earns 5 Brainy Bucks. Second place earns 3 Brainy Bucks. Third place earns 1 Brainy Buck, whatever it may be, whether it's team play, individual play, completion of homework assignments. They complete 10 consecutive assignments on time. They earn Brainy Bucks. So I give students opportunities throughout the day to earn these Brainy Bucks. So it also ties in my classroom management system. That's just one part of a few things that I have in place for classroom management that I have found to be successful. That also ties into a reward system as well. But once again, that works for my teaching style, my personality, my students. Everyone's different. I'd love to hear from those of you out there listening what you're doing with your class, whether you're doing some sort of external reward, if you rely solely on and that internal motivation factor instead. Share your, share what you're doing in the comments. Thank you to those who have been listening to this podcast and following this podcast, especially from the beginning. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for your support. For those that are new to this podcast, please like, subscribe, comment, review, all the above. I'd love to get some feedback. Things that you like about the podcast, things that you'd like to see me improve on with this podcast. But I appreciate the love and support. Thank you all. This is Joe Camps, aka the No-Frills teacher. Have a good night.